Okay, good. So, um, so the last time we chatted about these operations, right? That in a way can modify the order in which certain words appear in the sentence and they are interpreted in the sentence, right? And especially we are interested in, for instance, the order of composing the constituents, right? Like the spy with the binocular. If with the binocular was modifying the spy, then you would get a meaning. But if the binocular would modify the act of watching, then you get another meaning, right? But what we are specifically interested in now is about the order of operators, such as, for instance, logical connectives or quantifiers, okay? And in particular, we talk a lot about quantifiers. Why? Well, uh, let's say for two reasons, right? So the presence of quantifiers in natural languages is a very, very strong evidence for the existence of certain type of representation that we call logic form, or certain operations at the logical level that we have to perform in order to account for the way we understand language. Okay, so if in a word someone spoke like of the logicality of language, right? So if we didn't have quantifiers and logical connectives, we might doubt that natural languages are logical at all, because as we've seen, the way we interpret certain words like and or appears to be different from the way these connectives are actually modeled in first order logic, for instance, right? To some extent. And to some extent, they appear to bear some similarities, okay? So it really stems from the ideas of Grice to say that, in fact, these words in natural languages are exactly the same as these words in formal languages. And the difference between the way we interpret them in natural languages and the way they're interpreted in formal languages, it's really depending on what we call pragmatics. So on additional inferences or an additional reasoning deductions that we sort of perform in as rational agents of communication, basically. So we take these elements as real formal elements, and then we add on top of that other inferences that come from the way we use language and the way we cooperate with our addressee during communication. Okay, so this is a very, very, very hot topic in linguistics and in psycholinguistics, because it's really something that tells you about the, let's say, the interface between your language proper, your language processing cognitive system, and your capacity of interpreting the real world and assigning meanings to the real world, and also to, for instance, to draw expectations and intentions about the meaning that you want to convey. Okay. So yeah. So in format like in theoretical terms, people often speak about the speaker meaning, which is really what the speaker wants to say, and the sentence meaning, which is what is encoded in the words of the sentence. Okay, and these two things sometimes are a little bit different. And the idea is that when we reinterpret a sentence, in a way we superimpose, for instance, our speaker meaning, or for instance, the reason why we said that sentence, the effect, the communicative effect that we want to achieve by uttering that sentence. Okay, and it is the job of pragmatic to come up with this sort of interpretation. But sometimes even the speaker meaning is really depending on some specific systematic linguistic based operations in order to get to that interpretation. And we know this because these operations are constrained. So they cannot freely apply. You cannot interpret a sentence by scrambling the words in any order you want, but there are some linguistic constraints. And this tells us that the interface between whatever we want to call language proper and whatever we want to call our extra linguistic knowledge is not like it's not a completely free interface where you can do whatever you want, but you have rules, okay? And if you have rules, the study of these rules is very telling with respect to the structure and the functioning of the system, okay? This is why these topics are very, very important and also very hot nowadays, okay? So let's go back to our case of ambiguity introduced by universal quantifier and negation. I'm not even sure we talked about this with Mike. Yeah, I think you had this. No, you had the example with the existential and the universal, right? Good. So now we're not going to use the existential anymore. We are going to consider sentences with one quantifier, which is the universal quantifier, all, okay, and a negation, not. And in German, this would be alle and nicht, or jeder and nicht, okay? Why are we interested in these sentences? Well, because it's well known, it's been well known for a while that sentences in which you have a universal quantifier in subject position and the negative marker, they generate structural ambiguity, okay? That is, you might apply the operation that Mike was talking about, like quantifier raising, for instance. And by that operation, the effect that you have is that you switch the order of these operators. And by switching the order, you get a different interpretation, okay? So let's have an example. Nice. Oh, I have to do this. Why do you show me 2 pages per time? Oh, again, not again. Ah, okay. I don't know how to show one. Does anyone know how can I show 1 page at a time and not 2?
Dani, I think you can, like, if you're in full screen mode, you can press Command-1, and then it should be like 1 page at a time.
Seriously. Oh, Mike, you are the best. Awesome. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So, why now? Okay. Okay. I don't know what I'm doing, but it works. Okay. So take a sentence like all the pirates do not have a beard. Okay. Now, actually, you have it. You also have an existential here, but for now, we kind of ignore it. So it's as if this is just beard, okay? And we are focusing on the universal quantifier negation. So we call surface scope reading, okay, or wide scope of the quantifier, the interpretation where we interpret all above negation, okay? So if you translate this with a little bit of logical terms, with this kind of semi-formal jargon, right? You would say something like, for every X, such that, for every individual, such that this individual is a pirate. If this individual is a pirate, then it does not have a beard, okay? So in formal semantics, you just translate the universal quantifier with this kind of formula, which is a universal quantifier operator in first order logic and a conditional, okay? This is just the way we interpret universal quantifiers. So why do we have the negation? Well, because there is a negation in the sentence and we have to put it somewhere, right? So as you can see here, the order of the universal quantifier and the negation matches the order in which these operators appear in the sentence. So what the sentence means in this interpretation is that all the pirates are such that they don't have a beard, okay? Which is equivalent to no pirate or no pirates have a beard. Do you see this? Is this clear? Also, I'm gonna open the chat now. So if you don't want to speak aloud, you are you're asked to write something. So then I see what you think, okay? So let's try to make this a little bit more interactive. There you go. Okay, so please, if you don't want to speak, but you feel free to giving your answer when I ask you things right there, okay? So this sentence means no pirates have a beard, right? But what we can do is that we can switch the order of all and not, as we have seen in the last classes, and then we get a different meaning. Okay, right. And this is the other interpretation. It's called inverse scope reading because the scope of the two operators is switched, right? So now it is negation taking scope over the quantifier, okay? And if you look at the logic form, the only thing that changes is that negation moves, or it's displaced, or it's copied away from this lower position to this higher position. Why do we call it higher? Because you always have to imagine to have a structure with constituents, and this would be higher in the structure, okay? So this might be an instance of quantifier raising, or in a way, can we say that this is quantifier lowering, Mike?
I mean, sure. I think it's a bit contentious here, right? What you do, you might also say that. So some people have argued that this is just not a structural ambiguity, right? But I mean, I think you can, for the moment, you can say whatever you want,
right,
to arrive at the interpretation you want.
Right. So this just to tell you that even syntacticians don't agree on this stuff. So we, from now on, we completely ignore syntax, okay? I mean, kind of. No, I'm kidding. We're not going to ignore syntax, but there is a lot of debate on how exactly to model these things. But at the semantic level, the effect is clear, right? You switch the order of this. So can anyone tell me, how do we interpret this sentence with the inverse scope reading interpretation? How would you spell it out in English?
Well, I would say that I could understand that at least some of the pirates do have a beard. Not all of the pirates do have a beard.
Very good. So, right. So you have said two things, right? One is that the natural way to express this sentence is just to say not all the pirates have a beard. We do that, right? And then by saying not all, we overtly mark the scope of negation taking scope over all, right? So this is an interesting example. When you say not all, you cannot mean none, okay? But the idea is that when you have this kind of sentence, then you can have the surface complete. Second, very interesting thing you said, that a sentence like not all the pirates have beard seems to be equivalent to the fact that you are saying that at least some of them have a beard, right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so let's freeze this intuition for a while. Okay, we're going to talk about that in the next classes, and let's have a quick you know a quick evaluation of the sentence. So let's say these are pirates, right? And these are pirates with a beard. So if I have a surface scope interpretation, okay, no pirates have a beard. What is a context, a visual context in which this sentence is true? This one or this one?
For the surface scope, the first one.
The first one. Does everyone see this? Right? We are saying no pirates have a beard. And if we evaluate this here, there are two pirates with a beard. So the sentence would be false in this context, okay? Now, nice. Now the tricky question. Where is the inverse scope true? Is it true in this context where out of 4 pirates have a beard? Is it true that not all of the pirates have a beard here?
Yeah, it would be true.
I see some yes, good. Okay, what about this context? Is this sentence true here?
No, I think it wouldn't be true.
It wouldn't be true based on the things you said, right?
Yeah.
But what if I tell you, you know, for some crazy reason, we cannot have a ship of pirates where everyone has a long beard, okay? We have to meet the Queen of England, and she's not super happy with beards. So it really must be the case that not every pirate has a beard, because the Queen doesn't want to see too many beards, okay? And then it happens that on the ship, every pirate shaved himself because he wanted to make a nice appearance to the Queen. And then we remember that the desired outcome would be that not every pirate has a beard. But then we are left with a ship with no pirates with a beard. And the wish of the Queen was that not every pirate would have a beard. And we are in this situation. Would this situation satisfy the desire of the Queen or not?
The first one would satisfy the Queen, yeah.
Right? So you see there is a kind of a mismatch. I'm not saying that you are wrong, Aziz, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm saying is that if you interpret this sentence logically, it's actually compatible with this kind of context.
Yeah.
But the way we usually interpret in natural language is in a way that it makes it not compatible with this context, okay? Do you guys see this? It is quite tricky, but if you see this, you're almost at the highest level of this class, okay? Many people have not seen this yet in the whole life, and they work on language. So if you see this relation, then you should think of you as already one step close to become professional linguists. Okay, so very well. Right, so this sentence is potentially true in both contexts, although this context is preferred, okay? Good. Now let's keep this for now. Skip, and let's go back to this, okay? So in the end of the last millennium, right? In the last years of the 90s, there have been done a few experiments to investigate whether children are able to perform this operation of switching the order of certain words in the structure of the sentence, okay? So, for instance, people wanted to see whether they could access the inverse scope interpretation, because upon certain assumption and observations, scope shift requires these fancy operations that Mike told us about, which are some sort of extra operations that modify the order of the word. So let's say that you don't have the highest amount of processing resources as we have as adults, right? So if you have limited processing resources, maybe you're not able to do this operation of switching the order of the interpretation of the operators. You're not able to apply scope shift, okay, through quantifier raising or quantifier lowering. And then the only interpretation that you are able to get is the surface scope. So this was exactly the aim of these experiments, to test whether children would be able to interpret this sentence in the way we do, okay? And the way that this has been tested is by the truth value judgment task, which is one of the most important tasks in the last decades for investigating how children interpret sentences in natural language, okay? So how does it work? Use an example. There you go. So this is Musolino, Thornton, and Crane 2000, okay? And I'm gonna show you this experiment in a slide. And this is an example of how you could present your experiment during your short presentation, okay? Now, I only have one slide. I told you you can have up to 5, so you can make it a little bit more rich, let's say. But this is the idea. So in the true value judgment task, all you do basically is to play out a situation with toys and props, and then you have usually a puppet, right? So the puppet at some point is describing what's going on in the visual scenario, and then the puppet is uttering a sentence, the critical sentence, the test sentence. And usually the experimenter asks the child whether the puppet is telling the truth or not. And the child has to make a judgment with respect to what the puppet said, okay? Can you tell me why, in your opinion, people decided to use a puppet and not directly ask the child, I said this, is that right or not, or wrong? Why do you think people start using puppets? Just any wild guess could come to your mind. Like in this case, wouldn't be the same if it was me, the experimenter, to ask the child, this is my sentence. Okay, so let's put this question on hold, okay? And let's see how the experiment was. So you had these little horses that were playing a game and wanted to jump over the fence, okay? This is the little fence. So the black horse managed to jump over the fence. The brown horse managed to jump over the fence. The white horse tried to jump, but the fence was too high for him. So he was a little bit scared, and then he just refrained from jumping and stayed there. Okay? And now the puppet utters the test sentence. Every horse didn't jump over the fence. And your task is whether to tell whether the puppet is right or wrong. So first of all, would you say that the puppet is right or wrong? Thumbs up who says that the puppet is right. One, two, three, four, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Thumbs up who says the puppet is wrong. I have 1. Good. Interesting. So those who said that the puppet is wrong interpret this sentence with a surface scope. Because in the surface scope interpretation, this sentence means that every horse is such that that horse didn't jump over the fence, which means that no horses jump over the fence, okay? And this would be false in this situation because two of them did. For all the rest, 90% of you who judged this sentence true, you interpret this sentence with the inverse scope. So you said, not every horse jumped over the fence. This guy did, this guy did, this guy didn't, right? There is at least a horse that did not jump over the fence. And this is ambiguous, so it's completely fine that you have different preferences, but I would like to point out that the great majority of you interpret this sentence with the inverse scope, which is coherent with what we always found with those sentences, right? Now, surprise, what Mussolino, Thornton, and Crane found is that most of the children responded that the puppet was wrong. And when they were asked why the puppet is wrong, they said, because this little horse here did not jump over the fence. Sorry. Because these two little horses here did manage to jump over the fence, okay? Which clearly tell us that they interpret this sentence with a surface scope. So they were surprised that actually some horses managed to jump when the sentence meant no horse jumped over the fence, okay? Now I will ask you again, do you have any clue why in the true value judgment task, a puppet is used instead of the experimenter asking directly the child whether what he said was true or not?
Maybe the children just tend to hesitate placing a judgment if they have to face the person. That's
Right.
my guess.
So you say children tend to hesitate, right? Carol said because then the children are more engaged. Yes, these are all potential issues. So definitely, right? But there is one particular tendency of the children that the experimenters want to avoid, okay? Which is a bias to say that the experiment is right, okay? It's called bias to consent, or yeah, which basically would induce them to provide more right questions, okay? And this was a big confound because they found, for instance, in all the experiments that the children were not behaving as expected, so they did not showing sign of being able to interpret certain sentences with negation or with quantifiers, where actually they were supposed to understand them because they would use them in normal conversation. So then Crane and McGee and Thornton had this idea, this brilliant idea of, instead of just asking directly the child, why don't we use a third individual, like a prop, so that they would not have this bias towards the puppet, because the puppet can be stupid, you know? Sometimes they say the puppet can be forgetful, the puppet can be wrong. So they don't have this stereotype with this stereotypical behavior with respect to the experimenter, right? To try to consent to the experimenter, but they would be more critical with respect to the puppet, okay? This was a very important change introduced in this kind of experiment, okay? Yeah, so, right, so what they found was that basically children only access surface scope, okay? And they claim that children are not able to do this operation of switching the scope because probably they don't have the competence to do that, or probably they don't have enough processing resources in order to perform this operation. Okay? Good. Now let's stop here for a second, and if you're not too tired, I would like to show you something now, and then we can take a break. Is that fine with you? Okay. So what I'm going to show you now is a real experiment that we did in this very using this kind of sentences, right? So I hope this will not crash as it did sometimes, but I will try. So let me stop my camera and share this. Okay. You see the video?
Yes.
Good. So this is an experiment that we did in our lab. This is Sophie, and this is an elementary school kid, might be like 5, 6, no, 6, 7, from 6 to 10, okay? So in this experiment, we explored separately both possible interpretation of this sentence. So the inverse scope interpretation and the surface scope interpretation. And this particular experiment that I'm going to show you is just about surface scope, okay? But also, the nice thing that this experiment is going to show you is that usually in acquisition experiments, you want to have the so-called control trials or fillers, okay? Which are trials that do not include the critical items that you're testing, but they are just put there in order to be sure that the children are going to understanding what you're telling them, okay? And these control trials, for instance, in our experiment included just sentences like, the dinos eat the bananas near the tree. And these sentences could be true or false, okay? And what you expect is that the children are going to accept them when they're true and reject them when they're false, and that they would not make too many mistakes. And at the very beginning of the experiment, we're going to have what we call a training phase, where we actually train children to do the task. So in the training items, they're the only items where we are allowed to provide an explicit feedback to the participants in order to explain them how the experiment works. After the training phase, you're not allowed to give them feedback, okay, in the critical trials. And you should not give them feedback in the control trials either. And if you do it, you have to mark it on your experimental report and make sure that you recorded that you actually bias the choice even in the control trial, right? And you consider them as fake. Okay. So as you see, there are different choices that you can take when you set up an experiment, like how many control trials, how the control trials should be, how many testing trials you have, and so on and so forth. So in this experiment, we decided to have two practice trials, and I think 1, 2, 3, 4 filler trials and 6 experimental trials. Okay. Okay, so let me know if you hear. So the audio is a little bit low. And this is not working on my screen. You cannot see the video, right?
Yes.
Oh, can you see the video moving?
I can't see it. It doesn't move. It's just a picture.
So
I saw too.
I guess I have to restart the computer. Oh, now it works.
Now it's moving, yeah.
Oh,
But it's stuck again.
yeah. Sorry again. Okay, so let's take our little break now. Okay, I will have to restart my computer, and in 5 minutes, when we're back, I'm gonna show you the video. Okay? So,
Yes.
see you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.